All right. Welcome to our first new MTSS Coach virtual session. Today, we're going to be discussing concurrent versus Tier 3 consent meetings. Okay. I'm Danielle Saunders. I am the district elementary counselor. However, I was an MTSS coach for 9 years. I was school-based, so I do wear a big hat. I've been in your shoes, although I definitely haven't been in your shoes for the current state of the world, but I do have knowledge on the role. So that is why I'm here to help all of you. So just a couple of housekeeping. Just please remember to stay muted as this is being recorded. Hold your questions until the end. This way I can get through the content. And there is a Microsoft form in the chat. If you can please go ahead and fill that out. That's how I'm taking attendance. Okay. So there are two primary types of situations where referrals for evaluation will be discussed. And I am sure that at this point, you have already been faced with some concurrent meetings. If you've done them and I say anything today and you're like, I didn't do that, as long as you've gotten the consent sent to where it needs to be, at this point, you're okay. I'm not going to ask you to go back and redo anything. The main compliance piece is getting that consent where it needs to be because that clock is starting. So I don't want you to panic. There's nothing that can't be undone or no damage that may have been done that you need to worry about. But moving forward, if I tell you something today that you haven't been doing, please just go ahead and implement that, okay? So the two ways that consent is obtained would be through a concurrent meeting or a Tier 3 review meeting, okay? The concurrent meeting is when a parent requests an evaluation, a parent or a guardian requests an evaluation. Those are the only people that can request this. There's been confusion or just people that think within the school setting that it's okay to encourage somebody to, like a parent or a guardian, to request one, or we really need to be diligent and I would say ethical with this because, and we'll get into this a little bit more, the why behind it, because we're potentially labeling a student with a disability. So we need to be really careful when us as a school is making that determination and pushing for an eval. Okay, so concurrence, our parent or guardian request. And when I say guardian, if you have a student that's in foster care, that would be the case manager that can ask. The case manager is the only one that can request an evaluation. And then obviously if the student lives with a parent or a family member, but they have educational guardianship, that is that's the only way that they can. A step parent can't. Again, unless you heard from the custodial parent that it's okay that they're at the meeting, but we really just need that legal guardian to be the one to request and then also sign. And there are concurrent meeting notes that are provided that guide this meeting. Okay, and then we do have procedures that are written out for you to use as a guide as well. Okay, what I will say about concurrent meetings, you do not need to panic. If you get a request, a parent says they want an IEP for their student, take a breath, and we don't automatically need to say, oh, I got to schedule this meeting and things like that. Yes, there is a 30-day time frame for holding a meeting, but I always say take your time, do a little research, look at the student's data. There are times that a parent is just saying things, but they don't really know what that means when they're asking for an evaluation or an IEP, or they get a prescription from their doctor saying to take this to school to get an IEP. So sometimes we just need to educate them on the process. And a lot of times they're really just wanting to know what is available, what kind of help or support available for my child. Okay, so that initial phone call is really important, and it could kind of help. I know in one of our last meetings, there was a school that was saying that they had a whole bunch of requests. It doesn't necessarily mean that those need to turn into concurrent meetings or even consents, okay? So that initial phone call that you make with the parent, you want to make that as soon as possible. Requests can come in if a teacher is having a meeting with a parent, your counselor, if somebody's meeting and a parent can verbally say it, we can take verbal requests. I would always try to see if you can get them to put it in writing, if they can send an email. That way you just have that documentation of the time frame. But you're gonna make that initial phone call, hopefully soon after you get that. Make sure that your school staff know what the procedure is for you, that if they're meeting with a parent or they get a note or something, or even through like Class Dojo, or however they may be communicating with parents, that they know that they need to get that to you as soon as possible. Okay, because that clock is ticking, that 30-day clock starts ticking once that request is made. So just make sure that your school staff knows whatever procedures you have set up to get that information to you. Then do a quick record review, look at the student, and then you're going to make that phone call. If it's a student that is not in tier 3 at the moment, and you'll get requests from all levels. I've had students that we're screening for gifted, where parents, and there is dual exceptionalities, yes, but the student maybe got a D on an assessment and the parent is panicking and wants to see what's wrong with their child. So those types of things happen. So sometimes we just need to help the parent to kind of take a breath and see that there are things that we could do to assist and help that don't necessarily need to be a full evaluation for ESE. So if the student is currently only receiving tier 2 or not even receiving, if they're just in tier 1, you're going to make that phone call and ask the parent what their concerns are, hear them out, and then you can offer them some solutions right there. I understand your concern. We do have some different levels of intervention that we can put in place. I see that your student right now is just receiving tier 1. We can look to putting them into tier 2 and providing them with some additional support in a small group setting. And then if they're okay with that, and I always would say this to the parent, let's give it about 2 months or so, and then let you and I reconnect, look at how your student is doing, and then see from there where we need to go. And a lot of times parents will be okay with that because they know that their student is getting some attention and some support. So you're going to document that. There are several places that you can document now. You can document in Focus on the MTSS tab. I know that there's a place in EduClimber now where we can make notes. Just document that parent phone call. You want to document that regardless of the way that it goes. Document that, and then document parent is okay with providing some supports, and we'll reconnect in a month or so and have all that documented, and that's okay. Now you don't need to have a concurrent meeting, okay? But you need to make sure that you have that documentation. If you get a request and you look and see that the student, and I know right now we're still trying to figure out tiers and where students are, if you do have some data from last year that's showing, or you talk to staff and they know that that student has been in tier 3 for a while, then now it's a different type of meeting. We're not going to do a concurrent meeting because this is now going to turn into a tier 3 review meeting. And that is more of the type of meeting that you want. If you have an endless amount of concurrence coming in for students that are in tier 3, or that you as a problem solving team have been looking and concerned with, then as a school-based team, we need to figure out where the gap is and how we're making these decisions, because we really want as a school to be the one to initiate those meetings. We don't now concurrents get out of control because of things in the community. There are a lot of reasons for that, but if it's a legit request from a parent, that then you want to be the one to beat them to that. Okay, because it shows that we're paying attention and we're helping and we're supporting. So if the request is for a student that's only receiving tier 1 or tier 2, we're doing a concurrent meeting. If that student is in tier 3, has been receiving tier 3, then we want to do a tier 3 review meeting, and I'll get into what that looks like as well. So the tier 3 review meeting, again, is when we're looking at student data as a problem-solving team, and that data will also include tier 3 progress monitoring. Okay, we need to make sure that we have students in tier 3, especially that we're concerned with and feel like this may go towards an evaluation, that we are progress monitoring their tier 3 interventions. I'll give you a quick little lesson on eligibility. For specific learning disability, if you're looking at SLD, the way that a student qualifies for SLD is through their response to intervention. The school psychologist evaluation is a great report, and it provides information on where learning gaps and specific areas to help with building the IEP and making sure that they're getting the proper supports. However, that does not determine, it's a piece to help with eligibility, but that does not fully determine eligibility. It's how are they responding to their most intensive intervention, tier 3 intervention. So we need to be progress monitoring. And I'll go into this a little bit further, as I'm sure that there's some questions on how do we do that and things like that. I promise I will get to that. But it's really important, and that's why we don't want to rush to evaluate a student under a concurrent, because if we don't have sufficient enough data and we feel like the student really does need these services, they may not qualify because we don't have the right amount of data to show that we've provided all of this intervention, and it's comparison. So they're going to be compared to where their peers are, where there should be. Is there a huge gap still after providing these intensive interventions? So it's really, really important that if you're hearing staff saying, oh, we need to rush and do concurrent and get this evaluation started, now you're the expert on this, that we need to make sure that we have the right amount of data before we proceed, and we need to do it as a tier 3 review if the school is the one that is initiating the consent or asking for the parent to sign consent. Okay. Again, remember, we are assuming that the reason for the inadequate gain is because there's a possible learning disability. It's a heavy thing for us to say about a student, so we just really need to be sure that we are handling this the right way, we are ethical, and we have all of the things that we need to show. So at that meeting, you're going to be showing the parent, these are all of the things that we've done for your child. And based on all of that and the data that we've collected, there's still a huge gap in their learning compared to where their peers are. So we feel like maybe the next step is to do an evaluation to see if they need stronger supports under our ESC. That is why all the packet paperwork needs to be completed before you sit down to have this meeting. So if you're, as a problem-solving team, you're looking at students' data and you're thinking, okay, we need to schedule a meeting, consent meeting for this student, don't overwhelm yourself, because you do need to have all of that paperwork done ahead of time to present to the parent. So just keep that in mind. Give yourself some room to breathe when it comes to getting all of that done. Schedule them out. Plus, You don't want to have a lot of consent meetings on the same day, the same time, because your school psychologist is the one now that will have to meet all those deadlines. So we want to try to spread that out as best as we can for them as well. So during that tier 3 review meeting, and we'll talk a little bit more about this too, you're going to fill out the second page of the WSAGA. Oh, and I see that I did not. And there's a page for the in the tier 3 review meetings worksheet that gets filled out there with the parent as well. And I'll have to fix my slide. Things that I did last night did not save. Okay. Vision and hearing screenings are needed for both types of consent meetings. I know it's been a little bit difficult right now. The hearing equipment was being calibrated, so your school nurse did not have that at the beginning of the school year. I don't know if they have it back now. However, we need to, not having a vision and hearing screening does not mean that you can not get consent. We used to say you needed vision and hearing screening before you can get consent, but we can't prolong signing consent, especially for a concurrent. But it's something that needs to be done, because when you're sitting down at an eligibility meeting, it's something called a mitigating factor. We need to make sure that the reason for the learning gap isn't because the student can't see or can't hear. Okay. So hopefully all of that is getting worked out at your schools. Now, with all of this new law and opting out and things like that, there are two things that could get in the way of this process. Parents do have the right to opt out of sensory screenings, and then also school psychologist observations. And I'll show you later how you can look and see if those are things that parents have opted out of. If it's the case for the vision and hearing and the parent wants to move forward with an evaluation, then they're going to need to bring something in from their outside provider for that, because we do need that. Okay. During the meetings, who you want to have at both of those meetings, the potential evaluator, which would be your school psychologist. If this is something that you think might also be a speech and language issue, you want to have your SLP there. If your RCS is available, that's fine. We want the teacher there. If it's middle or high school, whatever area of concern the parent has or you all have, whether it's ELA or math, maybe to have them there. If they can't, as I know it's hard right now to get coverage and things like that, just make sure that you have teacher input for that meeting. But you, the parent, obviously, your school psychologist, SLP are the ones that need to be at that meeting. SLP if it's only a speech and language concern, or if it's an ASD, because they need to do something for ASD eval as well. The team should look at data. You really want, especially if we want to determine, was this a student that is receiving tier 3? So we're going to do a tier 3 review meeting over a concurrent meeting. And then the consent, should the parent want to move forward with the evaluation, the notice and consent for evaluation, that is in peer. I know that there was a peer training recently. I'm not sure if all of you have gotten access yet. If you have not gotten access, I know it's in the works. There's one person that does that for the whole district. So I know it's in the works. If you haven't gotten access to peer yet, your RCS and possibly your school psych has access. Your school counselor, if they're not new, should have it as well, so they can help you with that. And then we can do meetings virtually, that's fine. If the parent is not physically in attendance at the meeting, then we just need to make sure we're not sending those consents home. Okay, we want them to come in and sign it, even if it's just running through the car line. Just have them sign it, but do not send those consents home. Once they sign it and date it, the clock is ticking, and we want to make sure that we have that in our possession once that's signed. And then for both meetings, the consent form, let's say the consent form and the referral for evaluation where the vision and hearing screening results go need to be submitted for a concurrent meeting. You're sending the concurrent meeting notes, the consent, a copy of the consent, and the referral for evaluation form to Constance DuBois. If it's a tier 3 review meeting, you're sending the completed WSAGA, the consent, a copy of the consent, and the referral for evaluation to Constance DuBois. Your RCS gets the signed copy, the original, and they will send that off to all consents. They're the only ones that can do that. And we want to make sure that we are doing that within a day of getting that. I would say as soon as you get up from that meeting, send it right away to who needs to get it. Because again, that it's a 60-day, not a 60 school day clock. Big difference. And all of this is in the procedures, obtaining and submitting consent for evaluation procedures. Okay, just an important reminder, the signed consent for evaluation must be submitted immediately, 60-day time frame. The timeline is set by the Department of Ed, and we are currently being monitored because of non-compliance with that 60-day time frame. So we really just need to make sure that we are making that a priority. I know things happen at the schools, crisis, things like that, you get pulled. But this is something that really just needs to be a priority. If you can, whoever's calling on the radio, if you could just have them wait, just scan an email and get it to where it needs to be. Okay. And then I have some slides here that just show the differences between the concurrent and the tier 3 meeting. I just thought it would be a little helpful guide. Parent guardian, the only one that can request a concurrent. Packet paperwork is completed after when it's a concurrent, and the paperwork is completed before when it's a tier 3. Based on data, student may not be receiving tier 3 interventions. So if a consent is signed for a concurrent, we're still making those data-based decisions. And if the student is just in tier 1, is really doing well, but the parent is insistent, you don't have to put them in tier 3. But what we really need you to do is make sure that you are diligently looking at data. We have a lot of information coming in now, and with EduClimber, if you feel like this student is teetering on the tier 3, then go ahead and provide that intervention, because eligibility cannot happen for SLD if they're not receiving that intensive intervention. So we want to make sure that we're being diligent and we're putting students in the level of intervention that they need, okay? And then for the tier 3 review meeting, the school decision, students have to be in tier 3. RCS is optional for the concurrent meeting. If they can't make it, the parent has a specific day and time that they can only meet, but it messes up with other things. The RCS is optional for attendance. However, for the tier 3 meeting, we really want to make sure that they're there. WSAGA is completed after the consent for the concurrent, and the WSAGA is the second page of the WSAGA is completed at the consent meeting, so that the completed WSAGA will be done at that tier 3 meeting. And then similarities. Okay, both need vision and hearing. Consent and prior written notice are both done in peer. They both have that 60-day clock once this consent is signed. Both need to be sent to Constance DuBois. WSAGA is completed for both, just the timing is a little bit different as to when. Graphed progress monitoring data is needed for both. And also just to let you know, the parent or guardian can bring whoever they want. Sometimes they want to bring an advocate and things like that. We can't prevent them from bringing anyone. If you do hear that they're bringing an advocate and maybe a lawyer, things like that, please just make sure you contact Angie Purdue at Student Services. This way, if they're bringing a lawyer, I believe that we need to have representation as well. So just make sure that you're communicating that to district so we can make sure that you have the support that you need for that meeting. That, and I've said a lot. I am going to open it up to you all for questions. So if you want to unmute, or if you want me to, oh, what does the WSAGA stand for? Okay. It's a written summary, summary analysis. So basically what the WSAGA is, and I can show you that. Sharing it. Let me know if you're seeing that.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, thank you, hon. Written summary of groups analysis. So basically what this form is the first 2 pages of a longer document that your RCS is going to be completing during eligibility. It just takes everything that you've done and puts it into a simpler form. Okay, so observations, area of concern, sensory screenings, vision and hearing, and then here, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and how did they do? Okay, and I'm going to go over this in our next session more in depth on how to fill it out and complete it, but this way you have an idea of what that looks like. Let me have it. What else you got? What do you do if the focus report from district says no interventions were in place for the student, but the prior teacher states they were implementing interventions? Michelle, I would just talk to people that were there before you to find out, were they receiving tier 3? And then if you can't get an answer, look at current data. You should be able to see what their data from last year was if they were in our district, and just kind of make a good decision from there. If you really feel like the student has a big gap compared to their peers, then I would say probably turn it into a tier 3 review meeting, or the very least, if it's going to be a concurrent meeting, make sure that that student is getting those intensive interventions. Okay.
I don't know if there's any other questions in the chat, but I have 2.
Okay.
The first one is, when we did our first concurrent meeting, I still didn't have access to peer at the time.
Okay.
And the school psych was able to do the consent one, but she wasn't able to do the prior written notice. And like, I just got access to peer, I think it was yesterday or on Monday.
Okay.
So can I go back and still do that prior written notice? And if I can, where is it?
So the prior written notice is in peer, and I am not a peer expert. That kind of came on after I was a coach, but if it should be one of the tabs when you are filling out the consent.
I'm sure I'll be able to find it once I actually log in and play around with it. And then my other question was, for LY students, when I was like reading the decision tree for ELA that came out, it said that if they have been an LY student for like less than 2 years, that they can't be in like tier 3 interventions. But like when it comes to this, so one of the students, he just moved here from DR, and yes, he's considered an LY, but when he was in DR, he was getting tested for like autism and all that stuff. And his dad has all of that paperwork. And so they're wanting to get like ESE services here. But since he's an LY, how does it matter that he's an LY? Does it matter how long they've been here? Like, do they have to be here a certain time before they're allowed to be tested?
No, and especially if a parent is requesting it,
Okay.
I would suggest that you get with your EES at your school, the ESOL compliance person at your
Yes.
school, and have them get some direction from their district people. But if there's documentation and things that have already been done,
Mm-hmm.
what will happen is they just like to rule out that is the gap because of the language barrier, or that they're still learning language, or is it because, there's truly something there, and there's a form in focus under the SSS that you would use for that. But we don't want to hold up something. Just have that conversation with them and get some guidance from them. But yeah, and if anything, there could be a bilingual school psychologist that will go out and would do the eval.
Okay,
But
yeah,
yes.
and I've talked to our ESOL leader, and she has already kind of like said that it's not a language issue because he does speak English, and in his classes he is doing pretty well, so it's not that he can't read or write or anything like that. So she has helped a lot, and then she's also like brought to my attention, because this is my first year even at the school. And the psychologist here is also new to the school, not new to doing it, but just new to Osceola.
Okay.
And the ESOL and graduation coach have like reached out to me and said, hey, these students, like and they've sent me the emails, like these students were supposed to be looked at last year. We did all of this, paperwork on them, but there's nothing anymore. Like the paperwork is non-existent. I don't know if it went with somebody. So I'm not really sure what I should do. Like, can we just restart the process all over again? Or
let's you and I talk, because we want to make sure, and there's a way to look in focus to see if there's a consent. We just want to make sure there's not a consent already signed.
Okay.
And I can show you all how to look at that. All right, we'll use our famous little guy here, Mickey Mouse. While I'm on his demo page, if you can see right here in the corner, the two O's, that means that a parent has opted out of something. So if you see that, you just click on that icon, and it's going to take you to the screen that's going to show. Now, this is a little bit confusing if you haven't looked. If you see red X's, that means that they did not opt out. They're good to go. But if you see a green check, then this parent opted out of mental health counseling. Okay, but they can still get school psychologist observations. Let's see, let me show you what the other. Here we go. So see vision screening, hearing screening. If there are green check marks here, then that means that the parent opted out of it being done at the school. So then you would need to tell them, okay, we still need that. Please bring us something in. And up to 1 year is good. So if they got went to the doctor over the summer within the past year and they did a vision and hearing screening, then they could bring that in and those results are still good. All right. So then on the side here, you scroll down to referred for evaluation. And if there was a consent, you would see, I almost wish I had a student so I could show you what it looks like. But if a consent is signed, you're going to see date consent signed. This whole thing will be filled in. It'll say if it's a concurrent request, it'll give the due date for the psychs testing to be done and all of that. So always just check here and make sure that there hasn't been a consent that's already
Mhm.
pending, even for speech, because we can't have two consents at the same time.
Yeah,
Okay.
of course. And so like what I noticed, because I did look on the student that they were talking about, and when I went to his page, it's not there. There's nothing there. And so what I think that they were trying to say is it wasn't like the parent wasn't the one that reached out. It was our graduation coach that referred this student last year. And so I guess they had already gathered all of like that packet that you guys are talking about. They had gathered all of that information. And then that's like where like the issue is right now, because there is no packet. Like there's,
Okay. So you're just gonna
that's
have
where
to,
I'm like, we're gonna
you're
have to
just gonna
redo
have
it.
to, yeah, you have to
Okay,
start over.
that's what I figured.
But we can get together and I can help you with that.
Okay, and then also, sorry, I know I'm
Yes.
asking a lot.
Okay.
I'm really like the packet. I get that there's a packet, but I'm not sure like what the heck is in this packet. Like, what are
Yeah,
all the documents,
we're
or where
gonna-
can I find all of these?
I'm gonna go over all of that in another session. I just want to do these specific to some topics so that we have a video library of trainings. So I will definitely go over that. And if you and I need to, because obviously you need to do some stuff sooner, then I'll show you. But if I would encourage all of you, if you do not have focus SSS access to academic MTSS and behavior MTSS tabs, then you need to have your administration email Connie Capola and request that access. Because it's a profile thing, it has to come from admin saying that you are granted that. Right, so everybody double check that if you don't have that, because that's where the paperwork is in focus. Thank you, Dave. You put her email address there in the chat. All right, Michelle with a PowerPoint. Yes, I will have this PowerPoint, although I need to fix it. PowerPoint and Teams, and then this, once we end, this should hopefully just go right on the Teams page, this recording, so you'll have access to it right there. But we'll make sure that you have all that. Michelle, yes, school psych is required for both meetings. So make sure that when you're scheduling that you're aware of their timeframes. We are down psychs right now, so it's really tough out there. I know they're at your school maybe one day a week. So when it's the school that's recommending an eval, just be aware of that. When it's a concurrent, we kind of are tied to that time frame. So just make sure that you're communicating with your school psych and knowing their schedule, because they do need to be at either of those consent meetings. Showed you that. This might be a bit unrelated. Who is in charge of MTSS behavior? I was told it was more so the guidance counselor, but I'm sure I'm just not. Okay. So when it comes to MTSS behavior, everybody on the team, like everyone can help to address behavior, right? When it comes to interventions, because you may have one or a few counselors, and at the high school level, they're not even really available for interventions. When it comes to providing behavior interventions, anyone can do that, even a para. You don't have to have a master's degree in counseling to provide interventions for behavior. Okay. Now, what you might be alluding to is the FUBA BIP. So you, as the MTSS coach, if it's a general ed student, you're going to be the manager of the FUBA BIP, but that is something that is done as a team. And I don't want to get too far down that hole, because we are going to have trainings for that. If it's an ESE student, if they're ESE for speech, language, or maybe SLD, and you're looking to see if maybe they're EBD or even ASD, that is managed under the ESE. So the RCS would be the one to manage that. But as a team, you're all helping because it's a big task. Okay. But you, as the MTSS coach, are overseeing and helping to facilitate the process of MTSS, but everybody is a part of it. Everybody can provide interventions. Some have more strengths than others in different areas. But so you kind of oversee everything, but you're not alone. That makes sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
You're welcome, hon. And if you joined after we started, in the chat, if you scroll back up, there's a Microsoft form. If you can go ahead and fill that out, that's how I'm gonna use that for attendance. And let me show you a couple of other things. If there are not any other questions, I want to show you.
I have a quick question while you're
Yep.
looking for that. When
Sure.
a parent requests a concurrent, we have 30 days to schedule that meeting, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
However,
So
that initial phone call may
yeah, right,
change
right.
that.
So
Mhm.
let's say that they want to go through with the
Yes.
concurrent meeting.
Yes.
We have 30 days to have that meeting, and we have to have the vision and hearing screen done prior to that meeting.
No.
No.
No. In the past, there used to be a thing, but now we still have to move forward and we can still get consent. But it's very important that the parent understand that we need that as soon as possible, because if the gap in learning is due to a vision issue or hearing issue, we need to know that before we sit down at that eligibility meeting. So if your school nurse currently doesn't have, if they don't have the hearing equipment, see if they can still do a vision screening. And then the parent may need to take the student outside to get hearing done. Hopefully that equipment, if it's not already at the schools, is getting there soon. But we can't hold up the meeting or consent due to the vision and hearing screening.
Okay, so we just move forward even if we can't get that.
Right, but eventually, like I said, it is something that is going to be needed prior to that eligibility meeting.
Right, but if the parents opted out and then they don't bring that stuff in,
then they need to understand that could cause their student not to be eligible for the services that they're asking for.
perfect. Okay.
Okay.
That's how I didn't know. It just came up with it yesterday
Okay.
with a parent because they've opted out, and I really didn't know how to proceed.
Yep, just be clear with them on that. Oh, and you know what? Man, my PowerPoint really did mess up. I had a whole thing about private school and homeschool. So I'll get to that. Okay, so this I just wanted to show you. This is a checklist for referral for evaluation. So this is all the documents that are needed in the packet, whether it's a concurrent request or not. These are all things that need to be completed. And we'll go over all of this more in depth at another time, I promise. Private and homeschool. So from time to time, you will get a request from a parent who is either homeschooling their child or their child is in a private school. You should not get requests from charter schools because they have their own, we work with them as well. So, but if they're in a private school and you are their home zone school, they're allowed to request that we do an evaluation. Okay, so the way that works is you're going to run it just like a concurrent. And you want to be sure that the parent is aware that the interventions and progress monitoring needs to be done at the school that they're currently in. We're not going to be responsible for that. There's no way for us to do that. So they need to be aware that the school that they're in needs to do interventions and progress monitoring. They can bring whoever they want to the meeting. I would highly encourage that they have somebody from the school, either there in person or virtually, so that you can get some background knowledge on the child. But these are pretty easy because there's not really much to do beyond having the meeting, getting the consent. We're doing the same consent in peer, and peer there's a way to do it to add a student, because they obviously won't have one of our ID numbers, so there's a way to build it in there. You just add, but the consent needs to be done in peer. And all the same things, the forms are being sent up, you'll use the concurrent meeting notes. But once that's done, pretty much that's it. The eligibility meetings usually take place at the school that they're in. So it's takes some time away, but there's not too much more that you need to do beyond having that meeting. But it is something that we do for those students. And this is what the MTSS Tier 3 review form looks like. This you'll find in the SSS tab in Focus. And just kind of like the concurrent notes, it kind of walks through. And you can fill out a lot of this ahead of time. But this right here is what you want to go over with the parent, because this is where you're showing how they did in Tier 3, the positive, questionable, or poor outcomes. And if you as a school is recommending an evaluation, hopefully, and I know this sounds bad to say, but hopefully that student is doing poorly in Tier 3, because if they're doing well, then we shouldn't be requesting for an evaluation. Okay. And then what the decision is, and then everybody that's there, including the parent, you want them to sign. And then this is the, oh, I didn't realize this one has somebody's name on it. This is the other form that gets sent, referral for evaluation. And if you don't have the vision and hearing screening yet, we still need to send this, because this form is also used for the district to assign the evaluation to the school psych. That's why even with or without the vision and hearing screening done, we still need to send this up. And you all have hopefully seen the really cool records review that happens in EduClimber now. And from what we learned yesterday, the form is live. So if you were to create it today and then used it for a meeting a month from now, the data should just automatically update itself, which is amazing. And then you can get graph data right from there as well. Let me also show you the curriculum instruction tab. That is another place that you can, oh, look at that mess, that you can get paperwork. If for some reason you're having issues with technology, you go to your class link to the curriculum instruction tab, scroll down to this MTSS tab. And in here, if you go to academics, we have all these tabs. There's for concurrent, problem solving notes, things like that. And then here's packet paperwork. So observations would be here. These are what you need to use for SLD eval. You could just get 2 of these. So if technology is not working and you need access to stuff, it's here too, the vision and hearing form, records review. Anything else from you all? And I'm still available if you need me to work with you. We can do a Teams meeting. I could come out, I can help. I just want to make sure typically what you're dealing with, besides trying to figure out what tiers to put students in, intervention, setting all that up, concurrent is something that usually happens like right from the get. So. All right. So with that, I will make sure that the updated PowerPoint is in there, but I do want to end with something. Something to hopefully make you laugh a little. Let me know if you cannot hear this. This is how to not refer a student for an evaluation. Of course, you're not going to work. Oh. Give up. Can you hear the
We
sound?
need to discuss how Jimmy is doing in school.
Yes. Let's discuss Jimmy.
Let's make sure we discuss him
Oops, sorry.
for 45 minutes so that we don't have time to discuss any other students.
Agreed. Do we have an agenda?
Heavens no. We will just discuss Jimmy until we run out of time. This is the sign of an effective meeting.
Agreed. Do we have all team members here to discuss Jimmy?
We do not. His teacher is busy and cannot attend.
Wouldn't she be an important person to have at this meeting?
Probably. Well, let's get started.
What about the school psychologist?
He is busy scoring 7 IQ tests.
Wouldn't he be an important person to have at this meeting?
Probably. Well, let's get started.
What about the special education teacher?
She's busy scoring 3 Woodcock Johnsons and cleaning up the seclusion room that a student vomited in.
Wouldn't she be an important person to have at this meeting?
Probably.
Probably. What about the school principal?
She's busy scheduling other meetings.
Wouldn't she be an important person to have at this meeting?
Probably. Let's get started.
Agreed. What do we need to discuss regarding Jimmy?
He is struggling with his academics.
In what area specifically?
Yes.
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 How do you know he is struggling?
I have a work sample.
You have a work sample?
Yes.
A work sample.
Yes.
A work sample. What does this work sample indicate?
He is struggling.
In what academic area is he struggling?
Yes.
What is the work sample a sample of?
It is a sample of his writing. It is hard to read his writing. Let's put him in special education.
Because of his work sample in writing.
Yes.
What interventions have you tried?
We have tried many interventions.
Such as?
I moved his seat to the front of the class.
To help him with his writing?
Yes.
I wouldn't imagine that would help him improve his writing.
Precisely. He didn't get better in reading or math either. Let's put him in special education.
How would that help?
It would be a seat moved even farther.
What other interventions have you tried?
I called his mother.
And did this help?
No, it did not. Let's put him in special education.
What other interventions have you tried?
But that's 2 interventions already. Are you trying to sabotage this?
No. I'm trying to use best practice. What other interventions have you tried?
I almost forgot. I also gave him response to intervention.
That's great. Response to intervention is best practice. What specifically did you do?
I gave him response to intervention.
You gave him response to intervention.
Yes. Isn't that best practice?
Well. Yes. How did he receive it?
Not well. Let's put him in special education.
I'm not sure that would be best practice.
Well, let me know how that evaluation goes. Thank you for this effective meeting.
I don't know if you thought that was funny, but I see some laugh. And even though that's really bad, some of that does happen where you ask teachers, well, what have you tried, especially when it comes to behavior? And, I've tried everything. Well, it's only the 4th week of school, so what have you done? So, even though that, like I said, that's something that's funny, there is a little bit of truth in that, where people just want and think that ESE is the answer to everything. But at the end of the day, we need to be responsible and ethical with what we're doing with our kiddos. So. All right, friends, if there is nothing else, I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you holding back those questions. I'm sure that there were things that you wanted to say as I was talking, so I appreciate that. Again, if you haven't already, please scroll up to the top of the chat and complete that Microsoft form so I have your attendance and can give you that amazing 1 point. And if you need me, don't hesitate to reach out.